this Ponzi scheme of happy talk about victory and we're just winning and if only you could see it. They even said today, Netanyahu's thinking of declaring victory in Lebanon, even though he has no agreement. He's going to say, we've destroyed the missiles, we've destroyed Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah missiles are raining down on northern Israel, even as we're speaking. Masses of them are coming down. So what is it all about? I think he has to keep this idea of victory ahead of Israeli people and ahead of others. And I'll come to the others in a second. But they've got to keep it, because once you start sort of accepting that you're going backwards, then all the fund holders quit out of the Ponzi scheme, and sure enough, it's going to crash, because if you don't get enough good news in, then the whole thing goes down. And so he needs that. But it's target, yes, to a certain extent, he needs the war to go on, because this is how he can keep this whole thing afloat. But ultimately, it's aimed at the White House, too. And we've just had a big scandal in Iran, whereby those very close to Netanyahu, the prime minister, and the prime minister's office, are being charged with, first of all, two things: getting access to intelligence that they should.
Let me just stop you for a second. I think you inadvertently said scandal in Iran. You mean scandal in Israel?
Yes, sorry, that was a mistake. Scandal in Israel.
What happened?
That someone close to the prime minister. There's been another arrest, a senior IDF officer, to a big scandal. In that what it has been is not only has sensitive intelligence been improperly used by the prime minister's office, but the allegation is, shall we put it politely, that it was curated to give a certain impression, both to the Israeli public, but also, I'm sure, to Washington, to the White House.
Alastair Crooke's analysis unveils the precarious balancing act Netanyahu is attempting, one that hinges on sustaining a narrative of victory. In Crooke's comparison, this approach resembles a Ponzi scheme, where success depends on keeping the fundholders, both public supporters and international allies, believing in an eventual payoff. But as Crooke implies, the Israeli public isn't the only audience. Washington is also in Netanyahu's sights, making this narrative crucial for sustaining both domestic support and U.S. backing. For Netanyahu, declaring victory is more than just words. It's a tactic aimed at maintaining national morale. Public perception is central here. If the Israeli public believes in a decisive triumph over Hezbollah, it's easier to sustain support for ongoing military actions. Even as Hezbollah's rockets continue to hit northern Israel, Netanyahu must present the situation as under control or even victorious to prevent a crisis of confidence within Israel. If cracks in this facade become visible, and it's perceived that Israel is not achieving its goals, public trust could erode. For a leader under immense pressure both at home and abroad, a shift in morale could destabilize not only his position but also the broader support for Israeli policy in Lebanon. Crooke suggests that Netanyahu's narrative isn't solely crafted for Israeli audiences, it's also aimed directly at the White House. By controlling the information that reaches Washington, Netanyahu hopes to ensure continued American support. Through a process Crooke calls stovepiping, Israeli intelligence selectively delivers information directly to U.S. leaders, shaping their perspective on the conflict. The term stovepiping refers to bypassing the usual checks and balances in intelligence sharing, directing information straight to top officials. This practice allows Netanyahu to frame the conflict in a way that serves his political interests. If he can convince the White House that Hezbollah is close to defeat, U.S. backing becomes more assured, reinforcing Israel's position and legitimizing continued operations in Lebanon. According to Crooke, recent events in Israel have unveiled a scandal involving senior figures close to Netanyahu allegedly manipulating intelligence. The claim is that intelligence has been curated or selectively framed to reinforce a narrative of success. This is not just for the Israeli public, but seemingly crafted with the U.S. in mind as well. By presenting intelligence that implies imminent success, Netanyahu can maintain the illusion of Israel having the upper hand. This narrative is crucial, as it reassures Washington of Israel's control over the situation. Yet, as Crooke points out, the reality on the ground, Hezbollah's continued missile strikes, tells a different story. This disparity between narrative and reality is critical for understanding how Netanyahu's administration may be trying to sustain a strategic illusion. Comparing Netanyahu's strategy to a Ponzi scheme offers a compelling perspective. A Ponzi scheme relies on continuous investment and belief in future profits. Here, Netanyahu's Ponzi scheme is dependent on sustaining confidence among his supporters and allies. If doubt seeps into the public consciousness or into U.S. officials' minds, the entire strategy risks collapse. The metaphor of a Ponzi scheme is fitting because it highlights the inherent fragility of a strategy that relies on appearances rather than concrete results. Crooke warns that should Netanyahu fail to maintain this image of success, both domestic and international support could diminish. And just as in financial schemes, once investors, or in this case, allies, pull out, the entire framework unravels. Crooke's analysis underscores a fundamental risk, the potential for overconfidence based on manipulated intelligence. By inflating claims of success, Israel's administration may inadvertently set itself up for a credibility crisis if the reality on the ground cannot match the narrative. Public trust, especially in high-stakes situations like conflict, is delicate. If Israel's citizens or the U.S. feel misled, the backlash could be severe. In addition, maintaining a victory narrative when reality points to ongoing conflict can erode Israel's strategic credibility. As Crooke suggests, this could lead to dangerous miscalculations, as Netanyahu may begin believing his own narrative, setting Israel on a collision course with geopolitical realities that are difficult to control. For Netanyahu, the perception of victory is not just about maintaining domestic stability. It's also a means to keep U.S. support intact. Crooke highlights that the White House, influenced by selectively presented intelligence, may inadvertently endorse policies based on distorted perspectives. This reliance on Israeli intelligence without thorough verification poses risks for U.S. policy in the region. The stovepiping of information, as Crooke explains, bypasses critical filters, providing U.S. leaders with an unfiltered version of events that aligns closely with Netanyahu's strategic interests. For Washington, the cost of backing this narrative could be high, especially if future events expose the inconsistencies in Israel's portrayal of the conflict. The U.S. could face criticism, both domestically and internationally, for supporting a position based on skewed intelligence. Alastair Crooke's insights serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of relying on constructed narratives, especially when these narratives shape critical policy decisions. For Israel, the stakes are high, as Netanyahu's government risks its credibility if the gap between public statements and ground realities becomes undeniable. And for the U.S., aligning too closely with an unverified narrative could result in strategic missteps. So, what's the takeaway? Crooke's analysis is a reminder that appearances, no matter how meticulously constructed, cannot replace the truth. While Netanyahu may attempt to project victory, the reality on the ground, missiles from Hezbollah, ongoing conflict, and rising tensions, tells a different story. As Crooke implies, a Ponzi-like strategy built on maintaining happy talk can only go so far before it encounters reality. As always, thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay critical, and let us know what you think in the comments. Is this just another case of manipulation, or is there more at play in Israel's strategic moves? Be sure to subscribe and join us next time for more insights into the unfolding global dynamics. It's like a Ponzi scheme, this endless happy talk about progress, claiming victory and saying, "We're winning. If only you could see it." Today, Netanyahu is reportedly considering declaring victory in Lebanon, claiming they've destroyed Hezbollah's missiles, even though those very missiles are still raining down on northern Israel in large numbers. So what's this all about? Netanyahu needs to maintain this image of victory, primarily for the Israeli people but also for others. I'll get to that in a moment. He has to project success because, if people begin to sense that things are going in reverse, supporters and stakeholders will start pulling out of this Ponzi scheme. Without a steady stream of good news, the entire facade collapses. Beyond domestic morale, this narrative is also directed at the White House. There's been a recent scandal in Israel involving individuals close to Netanyahu in the Prime Minister's office. They're facing allegations of improperly handling sensitive intelligence. In fact, it's suggested that this intelligence may have been selectively presented to paint a favorable picture, likely aimed not just at the Israeli public, but also at Washington and the White House. This selective presentation, often called stovepiping intelligence directly to decision-makers, creates this bizarre situation. On one hand, we hear talk of an imminent agreement because Hezbollah and Iran supposedly want a way out, but on the other, we see reality contradicting that narrative. Thanks for watching.